Hi everybody, welcome to SuckleBusters Outdoor Kitchen. Today we're going to go through brisket preparation 101. This process will take you from selection all the way to a trimmed and seasoned brisket ready to go on your grill. First up on our brisket prep 101 is, let's talk about what we're going to go through today. We're going to teach you how to trim a brisket, okay? We're going to talk about why you would want to trim a brisket. We're going to provide you a shopping list of products that you're going to need in order to finish the process from beginning to end. We will talk about brisket selection at the grocery store. We're going to take you through and trim a brisket, show you the process step by step how to trim the brisket, and then we're going to season the brisket and get it ready to put on the grill. The first thing you want to consider when you're picking out a brisket is the grade. There's select, choice, and prime. We recommend we're going with primes. If you choose a prime brisket, you can't go wrong. So to determine the grade of brisket, just look on the vac bag and it'll be clearly marked, like here. This says USDA Select. We know this is a select brisket. This brisket says USDA Prime and it's in red. We know this is a prime brisket. The other indicator on a prime brisket is they have this sticker that says USDA Prime Beef. Only a prime brisket can have that sticker. Okay, so some of the other major differences between the grades are price and then the quality of the meat that you get. The prime briskets obviously are going to cost more per pound and be a little more expensive, but prime cuts of meat come from younger cows. They tend to have more marbling, which equals flavor, and they're more tender. All right, so on your shopping list, this is what you need. You obviously need untrimmed brisket. They come packed like this in the cryovac bags, so you're gonna need one of those. Next thing you need, most important, you're gonna need a sharp knife, and I strongly suggest it is a very sharp knife. The sharper, the better. You're gonna also need a cutting board. Today, we're gonna use a SuckleBusters seasoning, so you'll need to use seasonings. You're gonna need some type of binder. Today, we're using Worcestershire sauce. We prefer to wrap our brisket, so we use pink butcher paper, and then to hold the brisket, you need an aluminum tray. So one of the top questions I'm asked is, do I even need to trim a brisket? And the answer is, no, you don't have to trim a brisket before you cook it. You can season it up, put it on your smoker, and go. You can do that. We recommend trimming a brisket, and the reason why is we want to remove some of the excess fat, okay? It will give us a better consistent size on the brisket, which is going to give us more even cooking temperatures. It's going to help you improve to get more seasoning to the meat of the brisket when you remove some of that fat. And my experience is it gives you faster cooking times. Overall, if you trim a brisket, you're going to get better results. And there are more expensive cuts of meat, but for the backyard cook, prime will do the trick. Stick with prime, can't go wrong. So that being said, let's take a look at these two prime briskets. And I just wanted to talk for a minute about why I chose this one as the brisket that I would like to use versus this brisket. First of all, this brisket is wider, okay? So you can tell there's a significant difference in the width of this one. I like this wider brisket. It is a bigger brisket by weight, but it also has a nicer shape to it. The second thing I looked at is the flat. And if you can see here, this flat kind of tapers down from thick to thin and basically goes down to just a very thin piece of meat. If you look at the flat on this brisket, it's much more consistent. It has a thick layer of meat all the way across to the very end. And for my money, I like this brisket better than this smaller one. On the back side of the brisket, the other thing I noticed about this brisket in particular is if you look right here, this has been folded up, so when we unpackage this, it's going to kind of roll out and give you a small, thin piece of meat. Where this brisket is kind of packed together as one piece, it doesn't have that feature, and it's just a more compact brisket on the point side, and it looks like it has really, really nice marbling in here. We have our brisket selected. We got a prime brisket. We're ready to trim it. 2 keys to trimming. You want a very, very sharp knife, and you want a cold brisket. So I recommend keeping this in the refrigerator, getting it as cold as possible before you begin trimming. The goal with trimming is to leave about 1/4 inch of fat on the bottom side of the brisket and remove all the hard fat on top. Another thing that we're going to accomplish by trimming the brisket is get it to a consistent size. If you can see now, there's kind of a small end and a large end. This is the flat, okay? and this is the point. When we're finished trimming this brisket, it'll be a much more consistent size all the way from end to end. That's going to give us better cooking. Okay, so let's start to trim. The first thing I do is I take a look at the top of the brisket to see if there's any little fat pockets that need to be removed. Sometimes this is just silver skin, sometimes it's a bit of fat. It's optional to trim this off. It's more of an appearance thing, but I like to remove it if it's, you know, a large piece of fat. I'd go ahead and take it off. So this is nice and trimmed. We're going to take the brisket and we're going to flip it over and trim the backside down to about a 1/4 inch thickness. So you just want to start by slowly trimming away. You don't want to go too deep, but just take a small thin layer off, and if you hit a bit of meat, just back off a little bit and continue trimming. Any stray pieces of fat like that, we can just take those off as well. And if you want to square it up, you can just square it off as well. Remove any brown spots that you don't care for. Okay, so this is trimmed down to about a 1/4 inch of fat all the way across the backside, across the bottom of the brisket, and that's in good shape. We're going to turn the brisket back over and trim in between the point and the flat. So to trim between the point and the flat, there's two major muscles here. There's the flat part of the brisket, and then there's the point or the fat cap. In between these two muscles is a large layer of fat. You don't have to remove all the fat in there, but if you can remove some of the fat, you'll be able to get more seasoning to the meat, and you can also improve your cooking time. I'm going to start here. There's always a really hard piece of fat right here. We want to remove as much of that as possible and basically get all the way down into the muscle and get under the flat and then trim under there. So I would start off by cutting a large chunk of this hard fat out. And you can see this is 100% fat. I just want to continue down by layers, taking a little bit off at a time until I get down into the muscle. When we get to this step, we've removed a couple of layers of fat between the flat and the point. You can see that these muscles are laying on top of each other and that this fat piece runs all the way from this side all the way over down to this side. So what you want to do at this point is cut down between the two muscles and remove that layer of fat. And what we're looking to remove in this area is just the hard fat. Again, just take it a little at a time. It's okay if you get a little bit of meat in there, but just try to back off and then go again. So on this brisket, it's a really nice cut, by the way. The prime really shows through. You can see the nice marbling that we have inside here. So I'm not going to trim all the fat out of here, but I'm going to get the major hard pieces, and then we have this great marbling that's left. Get some nice clean edges. The last thing I do when I'm finished trimming out the brisket is I notch the end. This is going to give me a reference point after the brisket is cooked as to which way to slice. When you slice and serve, you want to slice across the grain. So on the flat, the grain is running this way. So we're going to put a little notch here. That'll give me that reference point to begin slicing here all the way up the brisket. As we trim the brisket out, you can see that it gave us a much more consistent thickness from this end to this end. That's going to give us a better cook. Now that the brisket is fully trimmed, we're going to transfer it to our pan and season. First step in seasoning is to put a binder on. You could use yellow mustard. That's an excellent binder. Some people prefer to use a light coating of like olive oil or avocado oil. I actually like to use Worcestershire sauce, so I'm going to just put a light coat on both sides of Worcestershire sauce. So just get a little bit of Worcestershire on the brisket and then just rub it in and get a nice even coat all the way around the brisket. You want to get in between as well. And again, just rub it in. Okay, once the top side is done, we're going to flip it over and do the back. We're going to put on a base layer of salt, pepper, garlic, which we call SPG. Start at one end and go all the way down, completely coating the brisket. The next layer is our real flavor layer, and for this we're going to use our 1836 beef rub. It has a nice cracked black pepper flavor, and that's going to really give us a nice taste on the brisket. I'm going to put a little bit heavier layer of this on. Make sure it's fully coated. And for our third layer, we're going to use a light dusting of our Sugar Daddy barbecue rub. This is going to give it a nice sweet flavor. So we'll just make sure that's in. Just make sure that's fully coated, then we'll flip the brisket over and do the other side. We don't want to forget to get in between the brisket layers. This brisket is fully seasoned and ready to put on the pit, so fire up that grill and let's get going. If you have any questions, take a peek at our other video on how to cook a brisket, or just reach out to us on social media. And most important of all, take a couple of pics and post them out. We'd love to see your results.